I got married less than 24 hours ago, and the first message I woke up to wasn't from family or friends. It was from his ex-wife. I didn't even recognize her name at first. But the moment I opened it, I felt something shift. It wasn't angry. It wasn't messy. It was calm. Way too calm. She said she used to be exactly where I am now. And then she wrote one line I haven't been able to forget since. He contacted me 3 days before your wedding. I read it again and again. I didn't reply, but I didn't delete it either. My name is Ambar. I'm 39, and until that message showed up, I would have told you without hesitation that I had finally gotten something right. Hugh and I had been together a little over 4 years before we got married. Nothing about us ever felt rushed. It was steady, quiet, the kind of relationship where you don't feel like you're constantly trying to fix something. We just worked. We got engaged in February. No big production, no dramatic proposal. Just a conversation that turned into a decision we both felt ready for. We didn't want a long engagement. At this point in our lives, we both knew what we wanted, and dragging things out didn't make sense. So we picked a date in December and committed to it. The wedding itself wasn't extravagant, and I didn't want it to be. It was small, warm, filled with people who actually knew us. No performance, no pressure, just people showing up because they cared. I remember standing there during the ceremony looking around and feeling something I hadn't felt in a long time, like everything had settled into place. The weather held up, the timing worked, nothing went wrong. It wasn't perfect in a cinematic way. It was better than that. It felt real. Hugh isn't someone who performs for other people. He's consistent, calm, the same person in private that he is in public. That mattered to me more than anything. Neither of us are big on social media. We both have accounts, but they're mostly there out of habit. I don't post much. I hadn't even updated my relationship status when we got engaged. There were no countdowns, no curated moments leading up to the wedding. It just didn't feel necessary to broadcast something that already felt secure. Most people didn't even know we had gotten married until days later. And maybe that's why what happened next felt so off, because nothing about our life was loud or exposed. But somehow she knew, and she chose that exact moment to reach out. I didn't open her message right away. At first, I just saw the notification sitting there. A name I didn't recognize. No profile picture I could place. It didn't feel urgent, just unfamiliar. But something about it lingered. So I opened it. It was long, longer than I expected from someone I had never spoken to. And it didn't start the way I thought it would. No accusations. No insults. Just calm. She introduced herself like she assumed I already knew who she was. Said she believed I had just married her ex-husband. And then she said something that at the time didn't feel threatening, but didn't feel harmless either. She said she had once been exactly where I was now. I kept reading. Slowly. She told me she wasn't reaching out to cause problems, that she wasn't trying to interfere, that she just felt like she had a responsibility to say something, because no one had said anything to her. That part sat with me. Then she shifted. Not dramatically, but enough that I felt it. She said Hugh had been trying to contact her over the years, on and off, that he had a pattern of coming back when things in his life felt uncertain. And then, there it was, the line I couldn't shake. She said the last time he reached out was 3 days before our wedding. I remember staring at that sentence like if I looked at it long enough, it would correct itself. It didn't. She didn't send screenshots. No messages. No proof of any kind. Just her version of events laid out in this steady, almost careful tone. According to her, Hugh wasn't who he seemed. She said he could be perfect, attentive, present, everything you'd want. But when things shifted, he became someone else. Distant. Unpredictable. Hard to live with emotionally. She told me I had probably already heard things about her. That he had likely framed her as difficult, unstable someone who couldn't make things work. And then she said something that felt less like a warning and more like a conclusion she had already made about my future. That he would never give me the life he promised. I didn't feel panic. I didn't feel anger. I just felt something move slightly out of place. Because nothing she said matched the man I knew. But it didn't disappear either. For a while, I didn't do anything with it. I didn't reply. I didn't accept the message request. I just let it sit there like something I could deal with later. But you don't really forget something like that. It follows you in small ways. Not loud, not obvious, just present. I'd catch myself replaying that one sentence when things were quiet. Not when we were busy, not when we were out with people, but in those in-between moments. Early morning, late at night, 3 days before the wedding. It didn't make sense, because if there had been something, anything, I feel like I would have seen it. Hugh isn't someone who disappears or acts unpredictably. He's steady. He shows up the same way every day. That's part of why I trusted him. And yet, the timing of it was precise. Too precise to ignore completely. I found myself going back through the past few weeks in my head, not searching for proof, just checking. Conversations, his tone, little details that normally wouldn't stand out. Nothing did. Everything felt exactly the same as it always had. And that's what made it harder. Because now I wasn't comparing two versions of him. I was comparing what I knew to something I couldn't verify. At some point I realized I couldn't just carry it alone. So I told him. Not dramatically, not like an accusation. I just showed him the message the way it was and watched his face as he read it. His reaction wasn't delayed. Confusion first, then frustration. He said he hadn't contacted her. Not recently. Not at all. And he offered immediately to let me go through his phone if I wanted to. Messages, calls, everything. There was no hesitation in it. And that mattered. But I didn't take him up on it. Not because I was afraid of what I'd find. And not because I didn't care. But because I didn't want that to become the starting point of our marriage. I didn't want us to become the kind of couple that needed proof for everything. So I told him I believed him. And I meant it. But belief doesn't erase a question once it's been asked. It just teaches you how to live with it. After that, things went back to normal. Or at least they looked normal from the outside. We went back to work. We saw friends. We planned small things the way people do after a wedding. Nothing dramatic. Just settling into a routine that felt familiar. And Hugh didn't change. That was the part I kept noticing. He didn't become distant. He didn't act defensive. He didn't overcompensate either, which I think would have felt just as strange. He was the same, steady, present, easy to be around. If anything, that should have made everything simpler. And in some ways, it did. Because the version of him I lived with every day didn't match what she described. Not even close. I wasn't walking on eggshells. I wasn't second-guessing his moods. There were no sudden shifts, no emotional drop-offs, no moments where I thought, this is what she meant. So I let it go. Or at least I told myself I did. I stopped thinking about the message as something I needed to solve. I treated it like noise, something that had shown up at the wrong time and didn't belong in the life we were building. And for a while, that worked. The message stayed where it was, unopened, unanswered. And the question stayed quiet. Until about a month later, we finally posted a few photos from the wedding. Nothing excessive, just a handful. It wasn't even a big announcement. More like a quiet acknowledgement that it had happened. I remember hesitating before posting them. Not for any specific reason. Just a brief pause, and then I hit share. A few hours later, I got another notification. Different platform this time. Same name. I didn't open it. I didn't need to. Because at that point, it wasn't about what she was saying anymore. It was about the fact that she was still saying anything at all. That she was finding ways to reach me. That ignoring her hadn't made her stop. I sat there for a while, just looking at the notification. And for the first time, I felt something shift again. But this time, it wasn't doubt. It was awareness. This wasn't a one-time message. It was a pattern. And patterns don't go away on their own. I didn't open the second message. I left it there the same way I had left the first one. Unread, unanswered. But this time, it didn't feel like control. It felt like postponing something I already knew I had to deal with, because the question had changed. It wasn't what did she say anymore. It was why is she still able to reach me? I sat with that for a while, longer than I expected. And the more I thought about it, the clearer something became. This wasn't about proving whether she was right or wrong. It wasn't even about Hugh. It was about access. She had it. And I had never decided whether she should. That realization was uncomfortable in a different way. Not emotional structural. Like I had left a door unlocked without ever noticing it was there. So I brought it up again with Hugh. Not to revisit what she said, not to reanalyze the message, just to talk about what we were going to do if she kept reaching out. He didn't hesitate. He said we didn't have to engage, that if she continued, we could block her, document everything, and treat it for what it was: unwanted contact. There was no defensiveness in it, no attempt to minimize it either. Just clarity. And that helped, because for the first time, we weren't reacting to her. We were deciding something together. I still didn't open the message. Instead, I went through my settings, adjusted privacy, limited who could message me, closed a few gaps I hadn't paid attention to before. Simple things, practical things, the kind of things that don't feel dramatic but change what people can and can't do. And then I sat there again, looking at the notification one last time, not wondering what she wrote, but deciding what it meant that she had written anything at all. At some point, you stop trying to understand someone else's intention, and you start defining your own limits. I didn't block her that night. I thought about it. Sat there with my phone in my hand, her name still on the screen. It would have taken 2 seconds. One tap, and she wouldn't be able to reach me again. Simple. Clean. Done. But I didn't do it. Not because I was unsure about the decision, because I wanted to be sure about the reason. There's a difference. If I blocked her just to stop feeling uncomfortable, then she was still controlling the situation just from a distance. I didn't want that. I wanted the decision to come from me, not from her message, not from the timing, not from whatever she was trying to do. So I waited. I let a day pass, then another. I paid attention to what actually changed and what didn't. My life didn't shift. My relationship didn't shift. Hugh didn't shift. The only thing that had changed was the presence of a question. And I realized something I hadn't fully seen before. Questions don't disappear because you answer them. Sometimes they disappear because you decide they don't deserve your energy. That was the part I needed to get to. Not certainty. Choice. So when I finally went back to that notification, it didn't feel heavy anymore. It just felt unnecessary. I didn't open it. I didn't read a single word. I blocked her, not out of anger, not out of fear, just because I could. And that was enough. After I blocked her, everything got quiet again. Not the kind of quiet where something is missing. The kind where something unnecessary is finally gone. No more notifications. No more wondering if she'd find another way. No more checking without meaning to. Just space. And in that space, I noticed something I hadn't fully allowed myself to feel before. Relief. Not because I had solved anything, but because I had stopped carrying something that wasn't mine to carry. Hugh and I didn't turn it into a bigger conversation than it needed to be. We didn't sit down and dissect every word she said. We didn't go back through timelines. We didn't build theories. We just moved forward. And that mattered more than I expected. Because there's a version of this story where I could have gone the other way, where I ask more questions, where I start looking for inconsistencies, where I slowly shift from trust to proof. And maybe nothing dramatic would have happened, but something would have changed. Not in him, in me. And I didn't want that. Trust for me isn't about having zero doubt. It's about deciding what you do with it. And I realized I didn't need to answer every question someone else placed in my life. I just needed to decide which ones I was willing to live with and which ones I wasn't. So that's where I am now. I trust my husband. That hasn't changed, but I'm also more aware than I was before. Not of him, of how easily something small placed at the right moment can shift the way you see things if you let it. And I chose not to. Not because I had proof, but because I had a choice. Sometimes I still think about it. Not in a way that keeps me up at night. Not in a way that makes me question everything. Just occasionally. It shows up the way small things do. In quiet moments, when nothing else is asking for your attention. I'll remember the timing. How precise it was. How intentional it felt. And for a second there's that same pause. That same question. But it doesn't stay. Because now I know something I didn't know before. Not everything that enters your life deserves to be understood. Some things are just interruptions. And the mistake isn't that they happen. It's when you give them more weight than they ever had. I don't know why she reached out. Maybe she believed what she said. Maybe she needed to say it. Maybe it had nothing to do with me at all. And I'm okay not knowing, because whatever her reason was, it doesn't get to shape my life. Not anymore. That's the part I didn't expect. I thought this would end with an answer. Something clear, something final. It didn't. It ended with a decision. And I think at this point in my life, that matters more. Because when you're younger, you think clarity comes from knowing everything. Every detail, every reason, every truth. But it doesn't. Clarity comes from knowing what you're willing to carry, and what you're not. And I'm not carrying this. Not her words. Not her version of him. Not a question she placed into my life without context or proof. That doesn't mean I'm ignoring reality. It means I'm choosing which reality actually belongs to me. The one I've lived. The one I've seen day after day without contradiction. That's the one I'm building on. If something real ever shows up, something grounded, something I can see and understand, then I'll deal with it. I won't pretend it isn't there, but I also won't go looking for problems just because someone else suggested they might exist. That's not how I want to live. So no, I don't have a clean answer. I don't know why she said what she said, and I don't need to. What I needed was to decide what to do with it. And now I have.